I received a package yesterday. Not a particularly strange package by any means, as I receive a considerable amount of mail deliveries in my line of work. My name is David, and I'm a moderately paid publisher. I just want to get this story out there, but I probably should start at the beginning. It was a warm day at the office. Although the space was cooled via central air, the system must have been struggling to keep up with the exceedingly increasing temperatures outside because the office was beginning to feel humid, the air stagnant, persuading my flesh to leak sweat from each one of my pores. I didn't even feel like being here. I had gotten some saddening news the day prior regarding one of my more prestigious clients, a short story writer by the name of Joseph McHale. Joe had apparently committed suicide by throwing himself off a bridge, breaking himself upon impact on the cold river stones below. I knew he'd been having some problems, which had started to become evident in his work. I mean, his wife's suicide, his child gone missing, but I still never thought that he'd actually take his own life. Another thing that I did not expect was that package that was delivered the day after I had heard, yesterday. It was apparently mailed by Joe the day he leapt from that old bridge. It was his last work, and I wish he never sent that infernal booklet to me. I wish that I never read it. But hindsight is 20/20, right? Unfortunately, I pulled the pages from the manila envelope and began to read the cover page. I immediately noticed something was off when I read the title, "No One Will Listen to Me." The lines below read, "By Joseph McHale, dedicated to Lynn and Morgan." This was obviously meant to be a testimony to his dead wife and lost child, as these were the names of each family member, Lynn, his wife, and Morgan, his daughter. As cryptic as it was, I proceeded to the following page. The air was silent, crisp, and clean. The faint smell of snow lingered about his nose. Only the sounds of nearby traffic could be heard. "Daddy, can you put the heat on?" Joseph's daughter asked from behind his seat. They had been sitting for a few minutes, and the heat had begun to slip from the interior of his SUV. His wife was still inside the office building, whose parking lot they now waited in. Joe grasped the ignition key and turned over the engine so as to allow heat to blow from the vents. His wife was manic-depressive, and although her medication did a wonderful job at keeping her condition at bay, she was required to attend a therapist visit each month in order to receive the prescriptions needed. This left Joe and his 5-year-old daughter sitting in the parking lot for nearly 45 minutes. Sure, the interior of the office was heated, but Joe didn't mind running the engine a bit to keep them warm. He was typically reclusive, and the benefits of being able to sit in the peace and quiet, away from the judgments of wandering eyes, by waiting in the black blazer, outweighed any benefits of waiting inside. A few more minutes went by, Morgan chattering away in the back seat before Lynn, his wife, could be viewed in the side mirror approaching the large vehicle. "How'd it go?" Joseph asked as she opened the passenger side door and climbed into the seat. "Good," she spoke. "He asked how I was doing, how we're doing, and about the kids. He told me I'm doing really well and to call if I ever need anything. Just the usual spiel," she ended. "Good," Joe stated, as he placed the already running gas guzzler into reverse, made his 2-point turn, and proceeded to drive from the parking lot of Superior Health Mental Health Incorporated. The couple chatted about her visit and Morgan's subsequent behavior from having to wait in the parking lot, which was surprisingly good. Although the child would tantrum and misbehave from time to time, Morgan was an overall pleasure to have as a daughter, full of smiles, joy, and a light that seemed to emanate from her angelic little face. Amongst the chatter from the back seat and the conversation being held by the couple, the sounds of tires humming along the pavement and the whoosh of traffic could be heard. Although the humming of the wheels persisted, the sounds of passing vehicles slowly tapered off until the tires and the chatter were all to be audibly detected. The trek back to their family home would lead them outside the bustle of the city and into the desolate and peaceful countryside, which was currently enveloped in the pitch of night. However, Joe eyed something near to the road, about 50 feet away and rapidly approaching due to the SUV's velocity. As it passed, he realized that it could not be there. It couldn't be at all. It was a man, or man-like. He wore a top hat, a dull gray scarf, and a pristine black business suit. At first, the thing had been only standing there, seemingly staring motionless into the night, but as they passed by, Joe knew it to be looking at the vehicle as its head turned to follow its trajectory. It was tall, inhumanly tall, with arms that seemed freakishly long and expanding. Its face, it had none. Only a blank canvas of flesh where there should have been one. It was these monstrous features that made Joe question the reality of the thing. It wasn't until he glanced in the rear view, laying his eyes upon it once again, that he realized that his eyes were not deceiving him. The figure just stood there, distorted, stretched, and long. "Did you just see that?" Joe asked his wife. "See what?" Lynn replied, having no idea what just occurred. While the thing stood and zoomed by on the passenger side, Lynn was focused on her husband, paying no attention to the happenings outside the Chevy. "That thing we just passed," Joe exclaimed before he realized that she probably didn't even notice it, as it seemed to resemble the tall and branchy trees that lined the sides of the wintry road. "What thing?" she asked. "Nothing," Joe stated, as the thing had long disappeared from sight. "Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me," he thought to himself. Deciding just to chalk it up to a weary mind and forget the thing, Joe changed his focus back to the road. Before long, the left turn for their driveway was upon them, and the SUV slowly rolled into place before its occupants left its confines and entered their small, country-style home. It wasn't until a few weeks later that he would encounter the being again. Joe was on his way back from the store. The Chevy's passenger seat full of red roses, chocolates, and a large, stuffed white teddy bear holding a red plush heart. A smaller box of chocolates and a single carnation resided on the same seat nearest the door. The array of pleasantries was something Lynn had come to hope for from her husband on Valentine's Day. Not that she expected it. In fact, she was genuinely surprised and made extremely happy each time her husband came through for her on this day. Joe pulled into the driveway after a long Thursday at work. Before heading up the stairs to his home and entering through the front door, he quickly gathered up the gifts from the passenger seat and slammed shut the door. The air still had a lingering smell of snow that graced the ground, although most of it had turned to a yellowish brown, especially by the roadside where the plows had frequently passed by. The day was late, nearly 5:30 p.m., and the diminished sunlight prompted the exterior illumination to switch on. "Lynn, I'm home," Joe proclaimed. Lynn jogged to meet her husband and threw her arms around him, nearly forcing Joe to lose his grasp on the gifts, which would have sent them to the floor. "Happy Valentine's Day." Joe handed her the bouquet of roses, large teddy bear, and considerably sized heart-shaped box of chocolates. Before she could kiss him and thank him, however, "Daddy, did you bring me anything for Valentine's Day?" Morgan asked in her typical age-related impediment. "As a matter of fact, I did, monkey," Joe replied with a smile as he reached out with his other hand containing the small box of chocolate and the single carnation. "Oh, thanks, Daddy," she exclaimed with the brightest of smiles. "You're the bestest daddy ever in the whole world." Joe smiled at her and reminded her that he was her only daddy. "Well, then you're the bestest only daddy in the world," she retorted. He knew what she meant and reveled in the fact that his beloved daughter held him up so high. He gave his daughter a hug and allowed his wife to lead him into the dining room for his present, a lavished pepperoni chicken dinner sided with fresh garden salad and Chardonnay gracing the large, dark oak table. Before long, the little family was seated together and enjoying a pleasant holiday meal, just the three of them. The night slowed to an end, with Lynn preparing the master bedroom for nighttime while Joseph helped Morgan climb into bed with a tuck in the smaller bedroom down the hall. "Good night, sweetie." Joe presented Morgan with a kiss on the cheek. After she replied to her father's nightly message, Joe stood up and walked out the door, leaving only the dim glow of a nightlight to illuminate the room. Joe trotted down the silent hall towards the light of the master bedroom. But before he could push open the door, his daughter shouted out in terror from down the hall. Hairs on the back of Joe's neck stood on end as he shot back around and sprinted towards the child's room. Joe arrived long before his wife, as it took her more than a moment to put on her gown. Additionally, she knew that her husband was on his way, so the pressures of an emergency were not present for her. It would have been better if it was. It would have helped if she had seen it too. But in reality, however, it likely would have made no difference. Joe burst through the door and was quickly shocked into remaining motionless. There, in the shadows, just beyond his daughter's bed, was a shadowy mass. Tentacles seemed to writhe and squirm as its arms seemed to outstretch without limits. Although no silhouette of a top hat could be discerned, he knew exactly what it was. The nightlight lent a tiny glow, only illuminating the thing's face, or lack thereof. Breaking free from the paralyzing fear, Joe instinctively hit the light switch. He must have been going mad. It wasn't his mind playing tricks. He saw it vividly. It was right there. Only now, as soon as the light flicked on and brightened the entire room, the thing had simply vanished. Joe knew that he wasn't the only one who had seen it. Little Morgan sat petrified in her bed, an unbroken gaze resting upon where the thing had just been only a split second before. Before he could walk over to her, however, his wife came in through the door jamb, pushing him aside, and proceeded to her daughter's aid. "Why are you just standing there? Can't you see she's terrified?" she exclaimed at her husband. "It," Joe stammered. "It what?" Lynn asked. "There was a big scary monster in my room, and Daddy scared him away, Mommy," Morgan interjected. "Well, that's good," she stated to her daughter while presenting her husband with a puzzled look. For the moment, Joe had no response. He struggled with the concepts and images his eyes had just presented his mind with. Lynn retucked her daughter in, while Joe just wandered into his bedroom, trying to understand the recent event. "What the hell happened in there?" Lynn inquired from behind him as she entered the room. I thought I saw something," Joe muttered. "We can't really convince our daughter that there's no monsters in her room if we act like there is one," Lynn insisted. "I didn't say I saw a monster. I just said I saw something," Joe proclaimed. "Now who needs to be on medication?" Lynn replied with a smirk. Joe reassured his wife that it was just his mind playing tricks on him, and that he saw nothing. Although the couple laughed heartily about the situation, Joe knew that the thing he saw was not a trick of the mind. It was there, at his daughter's bed, and he only hoped that it disappeared from their lives for good. Unfortunately, his prayers would go unanswered. Winter had finished up the last of its frigid grip, allotting room for the budding of spring to come into blossom. The brisk days and icy nights came to an end as well. Now in the throes of spring, the days were considerably warmer, even though the nights yet remained quite cold. The warmth of the days that seemed to signal the approach of Morgan's birthday allowed for the family to celebrate the birth of their daughter at a nearby secluded park. The kids laughed and screamed in the midday sun while playing amongst each other, all about the sprawling child's playground. Joe stood in the nearby field and overlooked the goings-on while Lynn sat next to Carol on a park bench, enjoying the incoming warmth of spring while sipping sweet coffees and conversing about pleasant things. Joe winced in the sunshine while lifting a small, red, digital camera to his eye. He had been snapping pictures all morning, enjoying the rays of sunshine and the smell of spring that was sure to give way to increasing amounts of lush greenery and the smells of fresh-cut grass. Smells made more appreciated due to their long absence in the depths of a northeast winter. It wasn't the kind of camera that immediately displayed each picture after it had been taken, so it wasn't until Joe had walked back over to Lynn and Carol that he reviewed the photos. At first, they were normal. Children were playing and Morgan along with them, that bright smile across her face. About 8 or 9 pictures in, he noticed it. That man, no, that thing in the background, just lingering about the distant forest's edge. It couldn't be. At the distance depicted in the picture, it looked as if it could have been one of those trees, only grown in such a way so as to look like the branchy being, especially without the signifying top hat that he had seen it wearing during their first encounter. But as the images progressed, the thing moved closer and closer towards the playground full of carefree playing children. Joe furiously clicked through the pictures, watching the horror unfold, completely oblivious to the questions being asked by his wife, who had noticed the increasingly intensifying look upon her husband's face. He'd not seen it with his eyes. He surely would have noticed it had it been there. But still, the thing entered the playground and approached the children within. Joe's face went pale when he viewed the last picture, taken just before he had walked away. The thing had Morgan by the hand, as if the two were getting acquainted. Joe's face shot up in terror, panic-stricken, scanning the swings, slides, and other playground apparatus for his beloved child. No sign of her anywhere. There, off in the distance, near to the trees with her back turned, walked Morgan, ever closer to the foreboding woods. "No," Joe muttered. "Morgan! What's wrong, honey? Where's... Oh my God, how did..." But before she could finish her phrase, Joe had taken off, sprinting towards the forest and his daughter, who was now disappearing into the tree line. His heart was pounding, calling to his daughter as he ran, but it didn't matter. Before he was even halfway there, she was gone. He searched the forest for hours, shouting her name until his voice was scratched and useless. His wife joined him, along with nearby parents. The police showed up with dogs, search parties, and all that they could muster. Although the rescue party kept up the search for days, they too were unable to find any trace of Morgan. No one could explain how a 5-year-old could have gotten beyond the grasp of such a group effort in such a period of time. When Joe attempted to explain what had happened, no one believed him. Not even Lynn. He remembered the camera, but as he showed the pictures to the group of watching individuals all leaning in to view them, each picture was now only indiscernible blurs. The children, the swings, the creature. Nothing could be effectively made out. "These weren't here before. These were different, I swear," Joe tried to explain. But this only seemed to solidify everyone's disbelief. The police chalked it up to a child abduction, and Morgan would never be seen again. Joe didn't deal with Morgan's disappearance well, digging into all kinds of research and trying to figure out what he knew he had seen. He'd never seen it again since that day. It must have come for her. It must have been after her from the very beginning, from the first time he had seen that thing on the side of the road. This line of reasoning led Joe through all kinds of research, from de Grobman legends, the Tall Man legends, all the way back to the Babylonian demon god, Alu. Joe found this thing had been documented since the beginning of history as we know it, yet everyone seems to ignore its existence. People make stories and romanticize the idea, calling it Slender Man and rounding off the jaggedness of the presence by diminishing the monster that it actually is. It took his daughter. The more he tried to convince Lynn of this, the more she resented her husband for not getting to her in time, for not helping her cope with what she believed to be the reality of the tragedy. Lynn fell into a deep depression, one that her meds could not bring her back from. Joseph awoke at his desk, face stuck to the oak wood. He peeled himself up from the surface, rubbed his eyes, and stretched out his back that had been frozen in a slumped position for over 5 hours. As Joe made his way into the kitchen, he went to pour himself a cup of coffee, and he noticed that none was made. This struck him as odd, as Lynn was usually up way before the sun and had coffee already sitting within the pot. Her depression actually seemed to emphasize her insomnia, as she slept very little recently. Still, no coffee was in the pot. Joe proceeded to prepare the coffee for himself and went to locate his beloved wife. He checked the bedroom. She was not in there, nor was the bed ruffled, as if no one had slept in it at all. Morgan's room, he thought as he quickly sauntered down the corridor. Opening the door, he saw that this room was vacant too. A profound sadness filled his heart. He missed her so much. Weeping, Joe made his way into the bathroom to use the toilet and dry his eyes. As he did, Joe glanced into the tub and vomited onto the floor. Lynn lay in the tub, eyes pale and wide. Sadness filled her frozen face. The blood pooled upon the floor had most certainly come from the large, gaping wounds on her wrists, specifically the one on her right arm that dangled from the side of the tub. Lynn had killed herself. Behind her, written in blood, which had begun leaking down the wall, was written the words, "It's your fault." Joe lost his sanity. The air on the bridge was a little cool and breezy. It was a nice day, Joe thought to himself. He took in the sky, sun, birds, and all the pleasant things that surrounded him, for he knew that it would be the last time that he would enjoy them. When he went to take in the trees, his eyes lingered. If he could just catch a glimpse of the thing again, he would have a reason to stay. Joe did not, and he knew in his heart that he would never see it again. He placed a large manila envelope in the mail on his way to the bridge, and everything was over now. The pieces in their final places. Joe climbed to the top of the railing, standing upon the edge, and leapt. That was the end of my client's last tale. Of course, I immediately found the use of his and his family's names in the story to be a little unorthodox. I imagined, at first, that the story was an abstract representation of the traumatizing events that he had suffered, and nothing more, at first. That was yesterday. Today, I saw something on the side of the road as I made my early morning commute to work. There, on the side of the road, under the dark gray sky, stood a tree-like figure with no face, wearing a black business suit and a top hat. I would have assumed it to be a tree and that my eyes were playing tricks on me, until I saw it grasp the hand of what may have been a child before turning around and gliding back into the woods.